Hi everyone, my name is Daylan and my REHUGO topic was psychology. I wanted psychology because I wanted to learn more about the mind and how specific human behaviors work. When I was researching and doing all of my components, I gathered a lot of information about psychology and it helped me develop my thesis. My thesis is the mind is a vast complex region within our body that not just one factor affects how it works, hundreds do. Environment, genetics, and childhood all factor into why some people are more predisposed to mental illness throughout their lives and why some people are so successful. The brain is the core reason for why we exist and why everyone is different. It's crazy to think that a piece of little wrinkled flesh determines everything about us, from our personalities, if we're gonna be breathing, like it just affects everything in our life. The components I'm using in today's TED Talk is the entertainment one, which was on the documentary The Boy Interrupted, the history one, which was about the law of effect, and I also watched a TED Talk by Rebecca Sachs on how we read each other's minds. And I also am going to use my U document, which was a podcast about nightmare disorder. Start off, throughout my research and components, I learned that genetics play a huge factor into determining whether someone has mental illness, and it can make people really predisposed to having it. I watched a documentary called The Boy Interrupted, and it was about Evan Perry and how he committed suicide at the age of 15 and how throughout his entire life he just had signs that were mental illness. And his uncle committed suicide at the age of 21. So even though he had a really good family, a really good home life, and had no environmental factors that played into him killing himself, his genetic predisposition was just depression. The documentary also shows the struggles with his family dealing with his death, and it just highlights how detrimental mental illness can have on everyone, not just the person dealing with it, and how well people can hide it. Evan, when 2 weeks prior to his suicide, he was happy with his friends. Everyone described him as happy once he got on medication and he was coping. But it just shows that even though someone looks super happy and can be really full of joy, they could be struggling internally really hard. I'm gonna insert a picture of Evan and his family to show how well he hid his mental illness. Okay, the next thing I learned was a lot about the RTPJ region of the brain, which the primary purpose of this region is understanding people's minds. It's responsible for cognitive empathy. It's located in the right temporoparietal junction, which is above and behind your right ear, and it's just only specific function is to interpret what other people are feeling. And what's really interesting about this section of the brain is it takes really long to develop, and through childhood you can just see it develop, which was basically the TED Talk I watched by Rebecca Sachs, is she was investigating and researching this section of the brain. Rebecca also conducted this study on adults where she questioned their morality, and she developed, or not her, but she did a lot of research on this technology that can interfere with that section of your brain. So in the TED Talk, the adults were asked to determine if it was morally right if someone thought that sugar was poison because it was labeled deadly poison, and they put it into their friend's drink in order to kill them, but nothing ended up happening because the poison was just sugar labeled incorrectly. All the adults said it was wrong and the person should be punished. But when they came to this conclusion, they were using their RTPJ. However, the technology, which is called an fMRI, alters the function of this region. And when it was used on the adults, they couldn't determine whether it was right or wrong because it was distorted. I just basically learned how important the small region of the brain is for everything. Like, you use it in every single situation in your life. Another thing that I learned was about the disorder, the nightmare disorder, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically a disorder where you get consistent, reoccurring nightmares that usually have a very significant meaning. Basically, to become diagnosed with this disease, the nightmares must evoke an immense feeling of fear or distress that results in the individual not getting any sleep and interfering with their day-to-day life. It explained that there's a lot of mental illnesses that are linked with this disease, like PTSD, depression, anxiety. It can all make it a lot worse. And basically, from watching this podcast, it just helped, or listening to this podcast, it helped me understand that a lot of diseases can get roped in with mental illness. So once you're diagnosed with depression, you start to have just other diseases and issues such as lack of sleep because of nightmare disorder. REHUGO taught me a lot about psychology, and it really helped spark more interests, and it helped me want to learn more and more. I basically just came to the understanding that psychology is one of the most important aspects in determining the course of someone's life. And so many different factors go into determining whether someone is predisposed to mental illness and how they can handle their disease. Your environment, your childhood, just your genetics. There's just so many different factors that make someone who they are. And it's just really amazing that people can talk about mental illness and just like psychology more freely now. It's like not like shunned how it was back in the day. So we can help a lot more people who are suffering with issues such as depression or anxiety. And basically they're just not afraid anymore to ask for help and get help. And no one has to suffer in silence anymore because of just how many new breakthroughs people have made with the mind and understanding how the brain works. So yeah, thank you for watching. Bye.